it actually works. Today, we're going to solve the biggest problem with cast iron woodworking vices. See, they're quick and easy, and they're great to have, but they have one big problem. Let me explain. One of the best things about these vices is that they don't rack, which means the two faces of the vise always stay parallel to each other. That means that you can clamp things in the side or across the middle. And they're great at clamping things as long as they have two parallel surfaces. You see, one of the worst things about these vices is that they don't rack, which means if you have something with even a little bit of a taper, it's just not going to happen. You'll get one side clamped and the other side will just wiggle around. A common solution to this is to have a twin screw vise. And don't get me wrong, twin screw vices are great, but they're fiddly and they take a long time. But what if I told you I could convert the cast iron woodworking vise you already have into something that racks when you want it to, doesn't when you don't, and we're going to build it out of just this: a piece of 1/4-inch MDF, a scrap of 2x4, 2 nuts, and 2 bolts. And we're going to do it in just a couple of hours. Okay, this is going to be a race against the clock. Right now, it's 12:49. I want to see if I can get this done by 2:49. We're not going to cut corners on safety, but the first step is cutting down that MDF. So let's go.
I'm cutting 4 of these about 1 inch longer than the width of my vise and about half the height.
All right, the next thing I want to do is draw a curve. I don't have a compass, so I'm going to use this jig that I made. It's just a scrap of wood with another piece of wood on it, but this is going to make a radius. So I'll stick my holdfast through here and into the dog hole. And I'm going to bring this out to where it's right about in the middle. Good. Then after that, I'm going to grab a pencil and I stick it in this little hole, and then we can draw. Now let's take a minute to thank our sponsor for this video, Aura. Let me tell you a story. About a year ago, a hacker found my information on the dark web and hacked my personal social media account. It wasn't fun, but at least I didn't have any information on there that could have really crippled me or hurt me financially. What I did have was years of personal pictures of my kids growing up. Those are gone.
If I'd had Aura, all of that could have been avoided. Aura gets your sensitive information out of the hands of data brokers to help you stay safe from cyber criminals like the one that attacked me. It can also replace things you're already spending money on, like password managers, antivirus, VPNs, and so much more. With credit monitoring included, Aura offers an incredible value, and it's time to stop ignoring cybersecurity.
I felt helpless. There's bird poop on the back of that chair. I don't want to sit on that part. And if you want to learn more about Aura, go to aura.com/worstworkshop. Thanks, Aura, for making this video possible. Okay, here's one part where I'm going to intentionally move very slow, because the more careful a job I do here, the less sanding I have to do later. It's going to save on time, and nobody wants to sand. The part that really needs to be sanded well is this one. But this one can still stay a little rough because this is not the final surface. We're going to do a little work there, but not nearly as much. And what I'm going to do is put the sandpaper on one piece and use it to sand the other piece. Then I'm going to flip it around and do the other way. That's about as good as I need it to be. This one is pretty smooth. It's still got a few saw marks on it. This one has a lot, but you'll see why that's okay in a minute. And really, these are going to be pushed up against each other most of the time anyway, so you're not going to see either one. We're about 30 minutes in. The next thing I'm going to do is start prepping this piece. So we've got to send the bolts in through here. I'm going to have to drill some holes, I'm going to do a couple other things after that. But first, what I want to do is find the center point of this. So I'm going to use the old carpenter's trick where you put your ruler at a diagonal and make a mark at the halfway.
Then I'm going to run my ruler across those points and draw a line. It really helps to have a flexible ruler here.
Now I want to find the center of that line. And the next thing I will do is go an inch on either side of that. This is where I'm going to drill my holes. Okay, these should be drilled at an angle, and it doesn't have to be precise, but basically what I want to do is get the line to go from here straight down as if this were the top of the curve. So I'm just going to eyeball it. That looks pretty close. Let's give it a shot.
The reason I have this board angled is because I need the bolt to come out of the wood roughly parallel to the surface. This will matter later on because it's going to have to ride in a slot in the other piece, which will create out of those MDF pieces that we cut earlier. Now I'm widening the hole on the flat side so that I can recess a nut, which I'll glue into place. And this is how it all goes together. I'll know I did this right if the heads of the bolts lay pretty close to flat on the surface of the wood. Bonus points if the nuts sit flat too, but neither of these are critical. I'll have a little built-in tolerance, and if I need more, I can grind down the head of the bolts later to make them thinner. Now right now I'm tightening the bolts down all the way, but when they're actually in use, they'll be loosened enough to allow space to ride in the slot we're going to put in the other piece. And if that doesn't make sense, just hang on, it will later.
I just finished adding hot glue to these holes to hold the nuts in place. Gluing this in does a couple things for us. One, it helps us to maintain that angle that we have with these. And the other is it keeps the nuts from spinning around when we're trying to tighten and loosen these, which is something that we'll want to do later on. So let's move to the next step.
This part is purely optional. I'm going to attach this to my vise with dowels that will fit in the vice's screw holes and hold it in place with magnets. Honestly, you could just set it in there and it would be fine, or screw it in if you want it in there permanently. I just thought this was cool. You might have seen this already if you've joined me on Patreon. I've decided that rather than spend time on Instagram or TikTok or something, I'm doing my regular updates there. So if you'd like to see more content from me, I'd love to have you join there, either as a paid member or for free.
The good news is that this part is done. The bad news is that was the easy part. The next thing we're going to do is take these strips of MDF and we're going to make something that simulates a T-track. Now you may be wondering, why wouldn't we just actually use a T-track? Well, a couple reasons. One, we would have to bend it across here, which is fine, but then we'd have to make up this space with some other wood. Now, I know we could try to route that out, but do you want to try to route that curve? Because I really don't. So we're going to build these up, use one as a spacer, and then one as the top of the track. Let's see if we can do it.
First, I drew some lines. I drew one right down the center to start with, and then two outer lines, each about 3/8 from the center. These lines represent the outside of the track. The head of the bolt will ride in like the bottom of a T-track. And then I had a brilliant idea. At least I thought so at the time. See, I had less than 30 minutes left on the clock, and any other woodworker would have probably reached for the CA glue and some activator, but I didn't have any, so I used the good old hot glue gun. Now, in my defense, hot glue is plenty strong enough for this application. It only has to be stronger than whatever's holding the fibers of the MDF together, and I've tested it. It is. The problem is that you have to give it a little time to dry, and you can't clamp it or you'll squeeze out so much glue that it won't work. But at this point, I think I'm a genius. Okay, now watch what I'm doing here because this is important. The pieces of MDF on the bottom are spaced apart, and you can actually give them a little bit of room. These ones on the top need to be pretty close in to the shaft of that bolt. You should leave a little bit of space, but you've got to keep them tight enough so that the head of the bolt won't come out.
We're over time. That's okay. All we've got left is a little bit of finish work, and then it's going to be all done. So let's move over to the bandsaw and let's finish this.
But before I do that, I need to put these two pieces together by sliding those bolts into the slots that I made. Now, you may have seen it already, but I haven't. There's a big gap because I didn't let the glue dry long enough and it popped up. Let's see how long it takes me to figure out what I've done. And there it is. So as you can see, one side looks pretty good. It's only when you flip it over that you see the problem. So what do? Do I lie to my faithful audience in the name of YouTube Perfect? Obviously not. So let's go back to where this all went wrong. What I should have done is soak the MDF and clamp it overnight so it would hold its shape. Then I could have glued it at leisure, checking everything as I go, using wood glue, of course, because what kind of idiot wouldn't do that? Then when I trimmed it up, there would be no surprises, and even if it took a little longer, it would be way better. But hey, I wanted to do it in 2 hours. Can it be done? Probably, if you don't count dry time.
Oh, yay! That is what we're looking for. Okay, if we want to clamp something with straight edges, we're still good. Works just the same as it always did. Great stuff, that's fine. But now if we want to clamp something that has a taper to it, well, get a real solid grip on it. And that's not going anywhere. But let's say we want to clamp something with an extreme taper. This is about 15 degrees. And I honestly don't know if it can do it or not. That's about right. It's good. I wouldn't go any higher than that, but pretty good up to 15 degrees. And one of my favorite things about this is if I ever get tired of it, I only have to take it off and put it to the side. So the big thing that I've learned through this is that hot glue sucks. If you're going to build this, I recommend CA glue or take your time and use wood glue. Don't bother with one of these. Yeah, it can be done in a couple hours, but why? Why? Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks to Aura for sponsoring this episode of Worst Workshop, and I'll see you in the next video.